On this episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast Young Leaders Series, Sarah Thomas shares her journey from being a young girl growing up in the hills of North Carolina who never outgrew her cow phase, all the way to her current role at Select Sires in Ohio today. Sarah talks about some of her greatest mentors and the mentorship role she now finds herself in as a dairy judging coach and dairy youth advisor through the Ohio Junior Holstein Association. But if there's something I hope you take away from what Sarah shares today, it's her honest story of advocating to be the best version of herself by recognizing what it has taken for her to be at her best mental health and physical health as a high-performing young leader. This is a powerful reminder of the impact of mentorship and the significance of advocating for oneself in both personal and professional realms right here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast in this Young Leaders series. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and it's my pleasure to bring you these conversations that help to uplevel the skill set and the mindset so that you can be a top performer in the dairy farming business. Enjoy this conversation with young leader Sarah Thomas. Give me a little bit of your backstory, because I know your name, I know your face, I see you at Holstein Convention, but just tell me a little bit about you.
So I grew up in rural North Carolina, about 45 minutes west of Raleigh. I started showing dairy cows when I was 5, but I didn't grow up on a dairy. My dad actually has Herefords. My older brother, he's 8 years older than me, he started milking for a nearby neighbor, and their kids had just recently aged out of 4-H. So they offered my brother the chance to show, and I got to see it, and I thought, if he can do it, I can do it better. I was actually finishing my master's when I started my job at Select Sires, where I am now. I work at headquarters. My job title is product support analyst, but I'm sort of a subject matter expert for the mating software program, Select Mating Service, otherwise known as SMS, which the best way I explain it to folks, it's kind of like a dating app for cows or a matchmaking app for cows, but the algorithm is way better than what we see for people, in my opinion. And then outside of work, I'm one of the advisors for Ohio Junior Holstein, and I am an assistant coach to Bonnie Ayers for the Ohio State judging team.
Oh gosh, I love your story, Sarah, and thank you for sharing these bits and pieces. And so you got really involved in youth programs growing up.
When I first started showing, those first few shows when I was 5, I didn't know enough to really be nervous about things. When I got a little older, I would get sick. And then they started pushing me to do more of the youth program-based stuff. That's where I discovered Quiz Bowl, judging. I had a really good support system of coaches and mentors, which really helped along the way.
Can we talk about that nervousness that you mentioned? Because as a coach myself of kids and a mom and a person who also used to get extremely and incredibly nervous about performance, it is a real thing. And it's something that you had to work through, but also had support around you. Do you still feel those nerves? How is it for you now?
It's definitely improved over the years. When I was younger, I would hyperventilate. I would get so nervous. And I didn't even know that until I got to college that those are called panic attacks. But something funny now is that I've taken youth to National Holstein Convention twice now. And especially this past year, I took 14 to Utah. And I hadn't experienced much of that being nervous as a coach yet. I've helped coach college kids, but with younger students, especially at Holstein Convention, I found myself taking on my stress and their stress. So that was something new for me, was to experience that different type of stress in my adult position, I guess you could say.
You mentioned mentors earlier. Oftentimes I find that we feel called to mentor others because of the great mentors that we once had and continue to have. So who influenced you?
One of the first friends I made at one of my first cow shows, Michaela Mann, her older sister, Megan, quickly became a mentor to myself and plenty of other young people. She taught me just an exponential amount of things, her and her family. My first dairy judging coach, Jason Wright, and then his mom, Sheila Wright, is the one that would coordinate all the North Carolina kids going to Holstein Convention. So I have to give her a lot of credit for that. My Quiz Bowl coach, Margie Grubb, she believed in me and really pushed me. And she's the one that really found like that competitive spirit within me, I've had incredible dairy judging coaches starting in 4-H, Melissa Stabner, Nancy Keith, Brittany Thompson Heiser, and those were really my state level coaches. And then, of course, Dr. Catherine Knowlton at Virginia Tech. Bonnie Ayers is one of my biggest mentors. So without their support, nothing would have happened. And they've had a lot of faith and trust in me. So I really thank them for that.
What an incredible list of people that poured into you along the way. When you look back at those many mentors that you mentioned, what do you look back on and value the most about the way that they interacted with you?
They pushed me in ways that I didn't know I needed to be pushed. They taught me and showed me how to put in the work behind the scenes. And that's something I try to illustrate to youth I work with now.
What I'm hearing from you is the mentors that served you well were the ones that saw your potential, pushed you towards it, but also did the work behind the scenes to prepare you. And that's what you've done for the youth that you now mentor, whether it's through the Holstein Association and the competitions for youth there, also through judging too. How do you help them to work through the things that you've had to work through yourself?
I like to remind them that I wouldn't bring them if I didn't think that they were capable of being not only a competitor, but a good competitor. And I remind them of the work they put in. And I'm still going to love you just the same, probably even more. One thing I always tell my folks for judging is right before I ever went into a reasons room, I would take a breath that is so deep that it like shakes your entire body. And just that rush of oxygen, I think quite literally saved my life in regards to going into reasons rooms, because otherwise I probably would have passed out at some point. I try to share my experiences there, but also meet them where they are.
So what are your best tips for those young dairy judgers that you're preparing to give reasons? And as you mentioned, there are things that worked for you to be able to have success doing that. So what are your top tips?
Please don't come in and give a canned set. They might sound good, but they're not going to be accurate. I think the biggest pet peeve of anybody taking reasons is if you come in there and lie. So focus on telling the truth. Tell us how you see the cows, even if it's not exactly eloquently spoken, because you got to start somewhere. They want to see you succeed and thrive and just do the best that you can. No one wants to see you come in and give a poor set of reasons by any means. Find what works for you. Build your own vocabulary. So that's probably some of my biggest advice there.
I want to tie these things together that we've been talking about today, Sarah. Do you feel like you are a more confident person because of all of these experiences?
100%. As a kid, I was extremely shy and timid, did not like to talk to people. So being able to grow from that has been extremely important. Had I not done those experiences growing up, I don't think I would have been able to actually do that show that day, because it's all about reminding yourself that I'm the judge today and I'm going to remember my own philosophies that I teach to others and convey those the best that I can. For me, growing up in the dairy industry, even from a young age, I knew I wanted to work in this industry. I just really wasn't sure what that looked like. But, now I found my own way to work with youth where I am. And quite honestly, when I came to grad school in Ohio, I did not expect to stay here in the slightest. And the job I have now, I really like that I get to work with a lot of consultants that I already knew before even having this job, and being able to be mentored by folks within the genetics realm. But there's still a lot that I didn't know, and there's still a lot I don't know. So I still have areas that I need to work on and improve, but leaning on those mentors. And my mentors don't work at Select Sires, but they've been around long enough to be able to provide some really, really, really good insight.
Sarah, you've come to the table with just a beautiful authenticity about real life and your journey, not just growing up and stepping into the role that you're in the industry, but really what it's taken for you to be the best version of Sarah today. And there's so much that's woven into that. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about how the career that you're in right now in IT is not necessarily what you thought you would be in based on your undergraduate and your master's and all of that. So speak to other younger people in a similar spot to where you're at in their career path and why it's okay to be in a spot that's different than maybe where you thought it was going to be.
Whatever the career is, make it the most that you can. And that's something I'm still trying to do myself. And lean on people where you can. Find a mentor at work, outside of work. Your boss is still human too. And focusing on what areas you need to grow. It might not necessarily be something you are over the moon about, but it might end up being something you really like or enjoy. Or on the other side of that, you're going to figure out something that you don't like, and it's only for 3 months. And like looking back for me, my favorite internship for me was the one that paid the least.
It's been a journey and a path with a lot of self-discovery along the way. And if you could go back and give 20-year-old Sarah a few nuggets of wisdom based on what you know now that you didn't know then, what would you tell 20-year-old Sarah?
My bullet point that I had for this was advocate for yourself. There's still so much life to live. And whether you're a student or a young professional entering or already in the workplace, there's such a journey ahead that it is unbelievable. But take advantage of those opportunities. You know, if you see something that excites you, do it. Explore those different areas of opportunity. But in college, too, if you're not looking at AFA, Agriculture Future of America, definitely do. I wish I would have gotten involved with AFA earlier in my college career. Go to those conferences because odds are wherever you go to school is going to help support to get you there. And there is monetary support for that in lots of realms. If you're not applying for National Dairy Shrine scholarships, do so, because it is not only some place to get a scholarship as a college student. National Dairy Shrine is such a deep-rooted community that even being affiliated and involved with it is going to expose you to a lot of really good paths. Mm-hmm. And I know it's nice to stay in our dairy realm because I know I like to, but even being exposed to different types of things, it just helps open your eyes so much more. I wish I would have read more books too. And that's hard. I get it, especially when you're 20 and you're probably still in college. You have books to read for class and it can get tiring, but make sure you read at least a few pages, whatever that looks like for you, however often that is, of something that you really enjoy.
Sarah, you have really invested a lot of yourself and your time and your talent into youth. And so if you were to fast forward 20 years into the future, what do you hope that the youth you're mentoring and coaching and leading right now would say about you?
I hope that they remember the love and the relationships built in those settings, and that even if it is 20 years from now and we haven't spoken years or something, that they can call on me anytime, whether that's for like a personal thing or something related to the industry, or if they're a coach at some point in time. I hope that I can look back and say that I worked with so many different kinds of youth every year. And my plans, like for Ohio Junior Holstein, going to National Holstein Convention, is I hope we keep kids in every contest, and whether they win or not, I want them to learn and grow from it.
Sarah, what a blessing that you are to youth in the way that you're able to serve as a mentor, to see their potential, to push them toward rising to the level of their own best self, whether it's dairy judging or at a National Holstein Convention contest or wherever their life path might take them. And what a pleasure it's been to talk with you this morning. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to add?
Before, we were talking about mental health and parents. I think a lot of parents they want to feel guilty or take some shame or something along that line of if their child would benefit from therapy, counseling, maybe medication. And I think that they think it's their fault, but it's not. It's so not, because I know that my own parents have had those thoughts. And again, a lot of this comes down to chemical imbalances, and that's no one's fault at all. But I think the best thing we can do is accept that it exists, whatever, maybe it may be depression, anxiety, etc., and just being able to act on that in order to get whomever it is to be the best version of themselves, I think is so important.
Wow, Sarah, we got more than I was expecting out of this conversation today, and in such a beautiful way. And I really, really hope that the people that tune in to hear what you shared today, I hope they are young leaders like you that can relate to where you're at. And so grateful for that, Sarah, for you sharing your journey as a young leader and being so real about what it's taken for you to not just achieve success, but to really be the best Sarah every day. And when you're the best version of you, look at all the people that you're benefiting and serving as a mentor, coach, and a leader too. So thank you so very much, Sarah, for jumping on with me today.
Thank you for having me.
You just heard from Sarah Thomas on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast Young Leaders Series. If you like what you heard today, please take a moment to rate and review our show and leave some comments and reviews as well. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and thanks for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.